fandom today, fandom tomorrow, fandom forever. Welcome back to the channel, guys. So today we are going to be doing another tier list video, but this time we are going to be ranking book to movie adaptations, but specifically from the era from like 2008 to maybe the latest being like 2016. So obviously there are a ton of book to movie adaptations out there. Like, this tier list could be super long. So I wanted to condense it to fit into a criteria that has like two specific rules. The first rule being that I think it fits into this specific era. It's just, once you see the movies, it makes so much sense. It's like, yes, they all have the same exact freaking vibe to them. Then I also wanted them to be movies where I also read the book, and so I can comment on how the book translates over to the movie. And I also didn't want to, like, it's a franchise and I had every single one in there. That's just way too much. So if it was a franchise, I'm just gonna be talking as the franchise as a whole. However, I do have two exceptions to this rule, and we're gonna be starting with those. So let's just get right into it. Okay, so we have 11 total movies to talk about in this tier list, and the tiers are God tier, hot, decent, it's giving nothing, and burn it. So the first movie franchise that I want to talk about is the Twilight franchise, and this is the one exception to the rule that I have read the books, because I have not. I have not read any of the Twilight books, so I can't comment on how the book translates to the movies, but it just felt like illegal not to include Twilight on this tier list because it is such a quintessential YA book to movie adaptation. And I mean, it really kicked off this era in 2008, and it started the different teams with Team Edward and Team Jacob that gets later adapted into other movie franchises. In my opinion, not having read the books and everything, I think that they are all good movies. There's just some like caveats to when you're watching, specifically like the first couple, where you kind of, in my opinion, if you go into it like thinking that it's a comedy, you're gonna have a way better time. I just don't think it should be taken too seriously, especially the first one. And with that in mind, it is such a fun movie to watch, and I've seen it so many times because it's just the perfect movie to put on when you're like sitting around with your friends. Its impact on pop culture alone is insane. Like, it's just so good. However, because like I've never been necessarily like the biggest Twilight fan and I didn't read the books, I don't think I would feel comfortable putting it in God tier, but it definitely belongs in hot. It's just, what a franchise. Now, the second exception to one of my rules is the Harry Potter franchise. I have read all of the Harry Potter books. However, I don't think that Harry Potter necessarily matches the vibe of this era. And I mean, it started way before this era started. However, it does like overlap a little bit. I think the last one comes out in like 2010. Or 2011. Yeah, so I don't really think it matches the vibe, but again, it wouldn't feel right not to include it on a YA book to movie adaptation list because, I mean, she's queen. She reigns supreme. It doesn't really get much better than Harry Potter, right? And this is another reason why I didn't want to just use all of the movies from these franchises, because I'm not going to rank the 8 movies separately. I actually, like, almost 2 years ago made a video doing my ranking of all the Harry Potter movies, if you want to go watch that, except pretty sure some things have switched around. That list kind of changes for me every time I watch them. But in my opinion, I think that the Harry Potter movies did a really good job translating the book to movie. I love these movies. I don't think there's like a bad Harry Potter movie. Not to mention its impact on pop culture, and I mean, everybody knows Harry Potter. Everybody knows about the different houses and the magic and the wands. I mean, it literally has its own theme park. Harry Potter is God tier. There's nowhere else you could put it, honestly. It would be a crime to put it anywhere else. Okay, so with those two kind of exceptions to the rules out of the way, let's get on to the rest. Okay, so next up we have the Divergent series. It wouldn't be a YA book-to-movie adaptation if Shailene Woodley wasn't a part of it. Divergent. Oh, so many things could be said about Divergent. The books I think, decline with each entry, and I think that also translates to the movies, so I guess in some ways that adaptation was accurate. Honestly, I kind of, like, in a guilty pleasure sort of way, really like the first movie. I think for the most part it kind of captures the vibe of the book, and I think the casting is also pretty decent with like Tris and Four and stuff. So yeah, I'm not mad at that movie. Insurgent, not so much, not very good. Did not even bother to see Allegiant, which they tried to split into 2 parts and just never filmed and released the second part because it bombed so bad. I think that really sums up the Divergent series as a whole. It just kind of falls flat in a lot of places, but it is so of this era, like 2012, 2013, YA, dystopia. Yeah, I think Divergent was just really, sorry to say, a Hunger Games wannabe. Like, it really thought it was doing something with the factions and the Dauntless running around and jumping off trains and, oh, we're an oppressed city with a wall and the government, and like, I see what they were trying to do. It just, you know, it's not as iconic. This one's hard. Like, I think the first Divergent movie could be decent, and the rest of them are giving nothing. You know, I'll put it in decent. Just know that Allegiant would be in Burn It and Insurgent would be in It's Giving Nothing. But I think as a whole, as a franchise, it can be in decent. I mean, they had a good budget. They had some things going for them. It didn't quite get there. Okay, next we have Shailene Woodley's other movie, The Fault in Our Stars. It also would not be a YA book to movie adaptation if John Green wasn't involved. So, The Fault in Our Stars, what can I say? It is just the quintessential sad movie. I mean, 2 teens with cancer falling in love. John knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing. This movie is so quotable as well, this movie and this book, like the fucking cigarette bullshit. And as far as like book to movie, I think it actually is pretty accurate and translates over pretty well. I think it's well casted. I can't think of any plot points that weren't in the movie that were in the book, although it's been a really long time since I've read it. You know, I think it belongs in hot. It's very easy to poke fun at it now looking back, and it does seem a little like formulaic in the way it's like definitely a little bit emotionally manipulative. Like, if you want a good cry, you know you can put this movie on, you know you could read this book. Okay, sorry, my camera cut out for the entirety of when I was talking about The Fault in Our Stars, but yeah, The Fault in Our Stars is in hot. I think it's a good movie, despite some of its like cringiness looking back now. Next up, another classic from John Green, we have Paper Towns, starring Margot Robbie. This also has Nat Wolff in it. A lot of these book to movie adaptations have like weird overlaps with the castings. Like Shailene Woodley and Ansel Elgort are both in Divergent, but they play siblings, but then play lovers in The Fault in Our Stars. And then Nat Wolff is also in The Fault in Our Stars, but then he's also in John Green's other movie, Paper Towns. Paper Towns is, it really falls flat in my opinion. I don't think Margot Robbie is like the best actress. The book is like pretty good, and I remember specifically being so disappointed because there's this part in the book when they go on the road trip to find Margot Robbie, and that is the best part in the book because it like breaks down the chapters like by which hour it is on their road trip, and in the movie it's like cut way down. Yeah, I don't know, this movie doesn't have a lot of flavor. There's not a ton of chemistry with a lot of the actors. It just falls immensely flat, and yeah, it's giving nothing. It's giving nothing. Okay, next up we have The Giver, and this is kind of a strange one because the book itself was like written a long time before most of these books were written, but I read it in high school, as I'm sure like, or no, middle school? This movie is so forgettable. I literally forgot this movie existed until I was figuring out what movies to put on this list, and it came up and I was like, oh yeah, oh that's right, that movie did happen. It has like a good cast, so you would think it would have been better than it was, but it wasn't. I mean, Taylor Swift shows up, so that's automatically a plus, but other than that, like, it's just so forgettable. The book is really interesting and thought-provoking, and this movie just doesn't quite capture that. It's giving nothing. and it's behind Paper Towns. Like, I would rather go watch Paper Towns than I would rather go watch The Giver. But I don't know, I haven't seen it in a really long time, so maybe if I were to rewatch it, I would feel differently. Now it is time to talk about the most egregious movie on this list, possibly the most egregious movie to ever exist, and I don't say that lightly, and that is the Percy Jackson movies. Where to begin? If you know me, you know I'm a very big Percy Jackson fan, read all the books when I was younger, and actually have been rereading them recently. I don't know how you could even fathom making a worse book-to-movie adaptation than Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. To miss the mark so fully, like be so far off the mark, you're not even close, is just mind-blowing. Like, people that haven't read the books think these are good movies because, yes, theoretically, like, it's a good cast, it's a good budget, but if you've read the books, you know how far off this movie is from the freaking book. It's actually insane. First of all, the ages, all right? Percy Jackson had the potential to be the next Harry Potter, and I mean that so fully. Just like in Harry Potter, the Percy Jackson books start with the characters all very young, like 12, 13. In the movie, they're freaking teenagers. The actors are all like 20. So that's out the window. They literally could have grown up through the movies just as the Harry Potter cast did. And that's even just the smallest mistake they made. The plot, just different, just completely different. I mean, they have some certain scenes that are in the book, but other than that, it's just completely different. Has a completely different ending, a different resolution. I mean, Logan Lerman, you gotta give him credit where credit is due. He was a great casting for Percy Jackson, just at the wrong time. I really would love it if they brought him back in some sort of cameo or in the role of Poseidon in the TV show that's gonna be on Disney+. I think that would be really cool. Other than that, I think the other castings are not good. I don't think Grover was well cast. I do not think Annabeth was well cast. They tried to improve it with the second one and failed. It's just horrible. I mean, this is obviously going in Burn It. I hope to never relive how horrible this movie is, unless it's to like play a laughing like drinking game at it and just drink every time it gets something so wrong, and then I would just get belligerently blacked out and then I wouldn't remember watching the movie. Here's hoping the Disney Plus show is immensely better. I already have so much more hope for it. The casting is perfect. They're young. They seem to capture the characters well. Rick Riordan, the author, is like heavily involved this time, so I have so much more faith in that one, and I'm excited to see it because these books deserve to have a good adaptation to screen. Okay, and going from the worst book to movie adaptation in my opinion to, in my opinion, the best, and that is the Hunger Games franchise. The Hunger Games is my favorite book. I've read the first one so many times, my copy is like withered. She has seen things, and I think these movies are almost perfect. I think that the book translates so well to screen. I think the casting is so perfect. Jennifer Lawrence as Katniss, like, she is Katniss. Like, she does such an amazing job and she's such a good actress. I love Josh Hutcherson as Peeta. Oh my god, Haymitch, Effie, like, everybody does such a good job. And stylistically, like, it was like they took from my brain what District 12, the Capitol, the Hunger Games all looked like, and they put it to screen, and it's just beautiful. I think the first movie is incredible. I think the last two aren't as good as the previous two, but are still really, really good and still translate from the book really well. And the second one, Catching Fire. I will never forget seeing that movie in theaters. Opening night, every theater completely booked out. People were dressed up. Of course, I had my side braid going. I was wearing my brown leather jacket. I was so excited, and this movie is, in my opinion, the best book-to-movie adaptation I've ever seen. I mean, it was literally like they took the pages from my brain and they put it on the screen word for word, frame for frame, and it's just perfect. I honestly think it has zero flaws. It is a complete slay, and I literally could talk forever about how perfect I think that film is and my enjoyment of seeing that in theaters for the first time. I love that movie. I love this franchise, and because of my personal ties to it, I'm gonna put it ahead of Harry Potter, but I mean, they're like pretty much tied for me. I got into the Hunger Games before I got into Harry Potter, so that's why it has a little special place in my heart, and that's why it would go above, but I completely understand other people organizing that differently. But yeah, Hunger Games is God tier, no question. Zero question. She slays. Okay, now we are getting into the Chloe Grace Moretz part of the video. She has, you know, her couple of YA movies here. The first one is If I Stay, and this is about a girl who gets in a car crash and goes into a coma, and she's just trying to decide if she should live or if she should die. Just a classic YA book right there of this era. What was our obsession with like these tragically sad premises? I read this book. I actually read both books. It's a duology, and saw the movie, and it was a pretty good adaptation. I think there were some things missing. Some miscast. I don't know. I didn't love the casting on the main guy. I'm blanking on his name. But I think Chloe Grace Moretz, like, people like to dog on her, but I think she did a pretty good job in the role, and this movie will make you bawl your freaking eyes out. It's incredibly depressing, but yeah, I mean, I think it did a pretty decent job. It's not super memorable. It's not one I necessarily like go back to watch, but it's decent, so I'm gonna put it in decent. I feel like it's one not as many people know about. It didn't have as much of an impact on pop culture, but still pretty good. Second one is The Fifth Wave. This one is just such a guilty pleasure for me. So The Fifth Wave is a trilogy that I have read, and it's your classic YA dystopia, you know, girl main character, love triangle, world ending, that sort of thing. Yeah, I really enjoyed the books. I think they're really engaging, and there's a lot of action. The movie, well, it definitely is a movie. Like I said, I think it's like one of my biggest guilty pleasures. Shout out to Cheyenne. Her and I kind of love this movie despite all its faults. I think if you haven't read the books, you'd probably think this is a pretty mediocre movie. And if you have read the books, you'd probably think this is a pretty mediocre movie. Nick Robinson. This one didn't do as well at the box office, so its sequels did not get adapted. I think that kind of says it all right there. In my opinion, it's decent, and I would rather watch it over If I Stay. Sorry, like I can't help who I am. And last but not least, we have The Maze Runner, starring Dylan O'Brien. I think he was really perfectly cast. I think this movie as a whole is really, really well cast with all of the different guys in the maze. Yeah, I think the first movie is pretty good. There's some things that get cut from the book, but overall I think it captures the vibe. I think it's entertaining. The budget's really good. Overall I really liked the first movie, and I've seen it like quite a few times. The other movies, not so much. Scorch Trials, The Death Cure. I've seen both of those I think once, and once was enough. Yeah, I think this has a similar issue to Divergent, where it just declines in quality. But whereas Divergent declines in quality similarly to the books, Maze Runner, that is not the case. I think Scorch Trials and The Death Cure are both really good books and have really compelling plots. Like, they just change the plot for some reason. And I never understand this with all of these movies. If you have the books there, and the books are successful, they have proven to work, like it has a giant fan base, they've sold 1 million copies, why change the plot? You know what I mean? It just doesn't make any sense to me. I get changing certain things or cutting certain things out for time, but changing an overall plot just does not make sense to me at all. So even though I think the first Maze Runner movie would maybe go in hot, I think the franchise as a whole is only decent, but I'm gonna put it ahead of Divergent because at least I watched all the Maze Runner movies. I didn't even watch Allegiant. And there you have it. That is my completed tier list of the YA book to movie adaptations. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments, or what you would do differently. I'll leave the link to this tier list in the description if you want to do it yourself. I'm sure everybody has different opinions depending on your feelings with the book and your feelings with the movies. But yeah, long story short, don't ever watch the Percy Jackson movies. They are a disgrace to this earth. And if you haven't seen The Hunger Games, Harry Potter, Twilight, or The Fault in Our Stars, go for it. You're gonna have a good time. Let me know if you guys want to see any other tier lists or any other videos pertaining to books or movies or book to movie adaptations, because as you can tell, I have a lot of knowledge on the subject. I went through a huge reading phase. I still read a lot, and I love movies, so it kind of combines a lot of my interests. So just let me know if that's something you'd want to see. I put out a new video every Monday, so look out for that. Like and subscribe, and have a good summer. Bye! Sums up I cannot speak today. I think that really sums up oh my god. I think that really sums up can I say Divergent? Is this Divergent? Divergent.